there's a role for building for the future, and there's a role for understanding that the future itself never arrives and that you have to find the process and the present fulfilling if you're ever going to find. It's very difficult once you're sort of 40 to convince yourself that the moment of truth in life is coming later. It's like, when is this happening? Right? It's like, is it going to be when I'm 60? I hope not.
A lot of these truths which we're talking about, which for our younger audience might seem kind of fresh and quite daunting almost, the fact that you might have to lock down your time. Do you think that kind of comes naturally as you get a bit older? Some of these truths come to you a little bit. Maybe some of the truths you wrote about in the book you kind of came to naturally understand? Or do you think people still, as they get older, kind of need to actively adopt that mindset in order to treat family, etc.?
Sorry.
In the right way. No, sorry, carry on.
No. I mean, I think it comes as on some level, it's the original, or one of the original sort of Jungian meanings of the midlife crisis, right? I think it comes as a crisis. I don't think anyone's really ready for the dawning realization of their limitations. I do think, with 4,000 Weeks, it's been funny. On the one hand, something that a number of people have said to me is that they bought another copy of the book for their son or daughter who was going off to university or who was at university. And I'm always like, thanks for the purchase and best of luck. But I don't think I would have taken this advice very kindly if it had been given to me in a book form by my dad when I was at that stage of life. And I think to some extent, that's not how it works. On the other hand, I think there's something really powerful about that some people do find in this perspective while in their 20s, while not all that far through the span of adulthood. Firstly, because it's never too early to start contemplating these truths, which are true at every point in the life cycle, right? I mean, they're true for a 5-year-old. It's just that doesn't occur to a 5-year-old, but and it's probably a good thing that it doesn't. But these truths about our limitations and about the speed of life and all the things we've been talking about are true at every point in the life cycle. And then just finally, also that I think sort of productivity culture and YouTube productivity advice and the sort of all this stuff that is often very much aimed at people at the beginnings of their careers is so toxic in certain ways that actually there's a new need to sort of push back against it right from the start of a professional life, because the moment you set foot in that world, you're assailed with, incredibly stress-inducing advice. And so we see all sorts of people complaining of burnout in their late 20s or early 30s, which used to be a thing that only ever happened to you when you were, in 50 or something.
Yeah, I think the relationship between stages of life and perception of time is interesting. You mentioned Henry Bergson, and he talks a lot, obviously, about the subjective understanding of time and experience of time in contrast to the objective one, which is, as you mentioned, perhaps maybe more prominent with the invention of clocks. But perhaps what the reason is that our perception of time is quite structured and controlled by the environments we find ourselves in. So if you're in university and you don't have anything to do that day on a Monday morning, you might experience time as more slow. But if you work a 9 to 5 and you're 45 years old and you're perhaps coming up towards retirement, for example, then perceptions of time also change. I'm not sure what you think about that.
Yeah, no, I think it's all heavily affected. I mean, time perception in general. I mean, this notion, this feeling that everyone has that time speeds up as they get older, which I think is something that you do start to perceive quite early on in adulthood. Like, I think, if you have memories of summers that seem to last forever when you were a small kid, already it seems like something's not quite the same. And there's lots of research about why that should be the case. I think that the feeling of the future being abundant is one part of this, right? And it factually is abundant if you're or likely to be abundant if you're younger and at an earlier life stage. And there's nothing wrong with sort of taking comfort and solace or finding that great. The risk is always that how you respond to that perception and whether you use it to sort of act like you've got all the time in the world in a negative sense, right? To sort of not step fully into the moment of life that you're in. And then I think you hinted at this a bit before, but like the routinization of time can really make it feel like it's slipping away very fast. As soon as you get into a sort of corporate setting, although there are further and fewer between these days, but where like everything is on rigorous hours, whole weeks can just sort of, and months can just sort of vanish into nothing. So one thing I like about my life now as a freelancer living in the countryside, I'm pretty busy and got lots of family responsibilities and all the rest of it. But actually the lack of complete predictability in it makes time feel more expansive than it did in a office setting.
I think maybe one of the responses people often have to this feeling that time is slipping away is to try and pay attention to it in every moment. To try super hard to be in the present in what we call like the age of distraction. Yeah. And maybe it's necessary. I've got a funny anecdote. Lucas is Maltese. So we were just, me, him, and another friend, Faris, went out to go see him in Malta, and we took out on his aunt's boat. And we were kind of going down the Maltese coastline, right? Which is kind of one of these atelic activities. It's beautiful. You're driving along the coast, and me and Lucas were sat in the two driver's seat, and our friend at the front, just purely by instinct, picked up his phone and just started scrolling through TikToks like this. So maybe there is something to needing to be in the present. But you do say that trying too hard to be in the present often means you can fail. So how can we find this balance?
Right. No, I love that anecdote, and it's it's not what you should be doing in that situation. But if you sort of decided to, perhaps because you were pressured by your friends, to put the phone away and to try very, very hard to really be in the moment, you'd run into the same problem to do with kind of willing the use of time that we talked about before when it comes to slowing down and all the rest of it. It's really something about the act of trying to do that pulls you out of the moment. I think that it's very difficult to sort of recommend what to do, because the moment you try to do something about it, you're committing the problem that we're talking about. I think the two things that help me are firstly a sort of intellectual understanding, which is like, you already are in the moment all the time by definition. This isn't a place to get to. It's just a place to realize or accept that you already are. So you can sort of relax that I must be present in the moment kind of energy and just be like, here I am. And then secondly, you can put yourself you can build into your life the kind of experiences that, broadly speaking, tend towards you sort of losing track of time. And that's different for different people. So you can go on trips into nature, and you can make sure you make time for the kinds of hobbies that you find, in which you find flow, playing musical instruments, maybe sport, whatever it might be. Not because you're then going to approach each one with this, like, I am now going to really enjoy this experience, but just because your life is naturally going to be more full of the kinds of things in which you're more likely to fall into that without thinking about it. But this is this very complicated sort of Taoist notion of effortless effort, right? It's very difficult, or not complicated, but like you can really sort of confuse yourself if you decide you're going to go through life with that attitude. You sort of just have to let it happen.
Yeah, I guess it all comes together as well in Eckhart Tolle and the power of now. It's quite a powerful idea to need to be in that present moment. But I was earlier this year doing some traveling in Vietnam, and while I was there, I noticed myself actively trying to be in the moment, to try and switch my mindset. I just finished my final exams, so I'm trying to change my mindset from feeling this need to do something, and at the same time I was feeling myself needing to be present and needing to get rid of that need. So it was a little bit paradoxical in that sense. And I think there's another angle to it as well, which was, I had a friend, and he'll know that I'm talking about him. He sometimes tells me, oh yeah, I'm in Africa right now, and I'm trying to find the balance between taking pictures and videos and actually enjoying it for myself. Or he goes to a concert and he's trying to find the balance between how much he should be filming it so that he can post it online and enjoy it. So I suppose that links to social media quite powerfully, which is perhaps the number one buzzword when it comes to the age of distraction. And in your book, you think that the issue with social media perhaps goes much deeper than turning us away from the work we're supposed to be focusing on, for example, but instead changing the way we see the world and perceive it. Could you perhaps expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, no, totally. And the thing that I was mentioning there, I think it's an interesting question in the case of your friend, right? Because it's not the case that collecting things in order to post them on social media is somehow like inherently a bad thing to do. People build interesting and fulfilling careers around doing this well. It's just that it almost occupies it takes a completely different sort of psychological inner gesture than showing up for the experience that's unfolding. One of the things that I write about social media in the book is just that, like, when I think about what spending too much time on Twitter did to my brain, it wasn't just that I spent an hour on Twitter and I should have used it more constructively. It was that I'd find myself, like, hours later walking along the street, like muttering to myself, arguing with some idiot who didn't know I existed, right? I hadn't actually responded to them on Twitter necessarily. I just sort of seen these kind of absurd nonsense. Or other people, I think, see a lot of stuff about knife crime, for example, on social media, which, when it happens to somebody, is absolutely terrible. But of course, social media is structured to make it seem like it's happening every minute to everyone, and then you're going to walk down your street in a different way than you would have walked down your street before, because of what that sort of attention-based environment that is just trying to compel you, that's all it cares about, has done to your brain. So that is, I don't know how it exactly relates to the question of, like, looking at things and having experiences in order to record them on social media, but it's just a reminder of how non-neutral these spaces are in terms of the influence they exert on our lives. And I think the thing is just to be as conscious as you can about that. And if from that conscious place you choose to say, you know what, this holiday is not going to be as amazing as it could have been as a holiday because I will be collecting lots of imagery for my social channels. But the flip side of that is I'll have some amazing social channels, and that gives me pleasure and meaning. Like, that's fine. But it's a question of knowing that that's what you're doing.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed that clip from our interview with Oliver Burkeman. If you'd like to check out the full interview, you can click right here. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and drop a comment with your thoughts down below. Stay tuned and see you next time.